Hello, everybody, and welcome to my podcast. I'm your host, Mindy Raquant, and how are you guys doing? I'm so excited to be back, and I just genuinely love this time to sit down and just record an episode. It really is a highlight. I love doing it, so I'm so glad that you've joined me today. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and subscribe to my email list. I have that linked in the description box. And then I always have my books linked in the description box as well. So don't forget to check those out. But anyway, today we're going to be going down memory lane a little bit for me. So I have had only one baby, and he is currently 3. He's going to be 4 in October, and I have never talked about his birth story online ever, and I was just thinking about how it would be kind of nice to just talk about it and share what happened, and maybe it can be helpful for moms to be, or helping other moms process their own birth stories. So when I got pregnant, we were not planning on getting pregnant. We had only been married for 6 months, and we were actually trying not to get pregnant at that time. We did not want to have a baby that soon, but lo and behold, it happens. And so I got pregnant, and if I'm honest, I was upset that it happened. I was not ready to be a mom. I didn't really want to be a mom yet, even though I did want to be one. It was so fast that I felt really overwhelmed and upset. And so because we weren't trying to get pregnant, we weren't prepared in the way of insurance. So we actually weren't covered at that point. And so we decided to go with one of my friends who they had Samaritan Health. I can't remember the exact name, but it was something about Samaritan Insurance or Samaritan Ministries or something like that. And so we decided to do that, but they had a policy that you have to be covered before you conceive, otherwise they won't cover. There's not a solid guarantee that you would be covered if you sign up after conception. And so we took a risk and we signed up anyway, even though we had already conceived. I forgot to mention these details. So along with my not being prepared to get pregnant, my mom had 4 C-sections, and she always had she had a long, difficult labor with her first one, and then I think all of her following 3 babies, she just had a C-section. She didn't really go through a long labor, and so that made me feel nervous about having a baby. And then also my older sister had a very long, difficult labor with her first. I just felt nervous and unsure of what to expect. And so I had a friend who was kind of like a whiz with births. She had at that point, she had like 5 babies, I think. And she had done multiple home births, and she was really good at it, and she had a really solid understanding of it. And so I naturally gravitated towards that understanding and expectation for myself. Like, I think what I told myself at that time, without even really realizing that's what I was doing, I told myself that I had to have a home birth, otherwise it was going to be a failure. And I think that's something that a lot of people think. And so that's what I was telling myself without even really being aware of it. And I just thought, like, I have to do whatever this lady tells me. I have to follow what she says. And so that's kind of what I did. I just took her advice and thought that if I followed it, that nothing would go wrong. And so, I got a midwife, and I went to several appointments, and then I think that I was about 5 months along, and then we discovered that the Samaritan Ministries insurance was not going to cover my birth or my labor. It was not a guarantee. And so we told the midwife that, and she was like, oh, well, if there's not a guarantee of you being covered, then she didn't feel comfortable being my midwife in case there would be a medical emergency and we would be transferred to the hospital. And so she said that she was not willing to be my midwife anymore. And so we had to get something else figured out. And I remember that was pretty stressful, and I was kind of worried. But at the same time, I had a peace that everything would work out. And sure enough, it did. We were able to qualify for Medi-Cal, which was really nice because I think I was like 6 to 7 months pregnant by that time, and I was getting a little bit worried about being able to have coverage just in case something would happen. And so we did get Medi-Cal, and I decided that for my birth plan that I would invite the lady that I mentioned already, who I was going to follow her advice and do what she said. And she at that point was pursuing becoming a doula. She said that she would be happy to be at the birth and just sort of be more of a supportive presence, not in the role of a midwife, but in the role of a doula. And so I said that would be great. And so she had just had a 3-month-old baby by the time that I went into labor, and so she brought her baby with her to the labor. So I had her there along with her little baby, and I also had a friend of mine who was going to be there to support me emotionally and spiritually as well. And then I had my sister-in-law there who I actually am not sure, but I think she participated in helping with other births, but I'm not fully sure. But she was there more to just take care of food and make sure that everybody was taken care of in that way. And so, we had my husband, Mike, and the doula, and then we had my other friend for emotional/spiritual support, and then we had my sister-in-law, so I guess that would be a total of 4 people. My pregnancy overall went very well. I was healthy, the baby was healthy, and we found out that it was going to be a boy, and we were very excited. And then, I think my due date, if I remember correctly, was like October 11, perhaps. I'm not fully sure, but it was something like that. And then I went 3 days over, so I was like 40 weeks and 3 days. And of course, every day felt like a very, very long time. But we got through it, and then I remember that it was a Saturday, and one of my friends said that she was available to take some pictures for us because we had not gotten that done yet. And so I dressed up in a beautiful, long, flowy dress, and we went and took pictures together. And that was so magical, and it was like I was so ready just to give birth. And so we went home. We invited my brother-in-law and his wife over to have some hot wings with us. And so we went home, and I remember that some of them were kind of spicy. And as we were eating, I remember feeling the first contractions that were not just Braxton Hicks. Like, I remember feeling them and being like, oh, this is different. Like, I felt like it was actually like labor was coming. And so after we finished eating and they went home, we went to bed and I could not really sleep very well. I remember that Mike was just like, he was preparing for labor, and so he just pushed all those thoughts aside and just slept. Thankfully, he wasn't in labor, so he could do that, but I was feeling those contractions all night, and I didn't really sleep that much. I remember dozing a little bit, but I just kind of tossed and turned and didn't really sleep too well. But then that morning, I remember it was around 5 or 5:30, I started texting the doula, and I was like, I think that I'm feeling like I'm going into labor now. And she called me right away, and she was asking me like some questions, and I couldn't speak for a few seconds, and she was like, okay, I'm coming over. So she got ready and came over, and looking back on it now, I wish I had actually waited to invite her to come over, just because of how long it went, but I had no idea at that point. It was my first time. So she came over, and I remember that for the first couple of hours, it was just like, going up and down the stairs, because we lived in an upstairs apartment at that time. So I remember I just felt like I needed to move. So yeah, we went up and down the stairs, we went for a walk, and I was just in motion a lot. And then my other friend, who was going to be there for emotional and spiritual support, she came over after a couple of hours. And I remember that we were all just like sitting around talking through the labor. It was just like I was kind of there, but also in labor, if that makes sense. It was definitely the earlier part of labor. So we were all just kind of there. And then I remember that it was a little bit later on that I started to go into the next phase, I guess, and I was slowly beginning to transition into the, I guess you would say, pushing part of it. So I remember feeling like he was coming down lower, and I stopped moving as much. We went into the bedroom, and I think the details have become fuzzy, both because of how long it went and also because of how many years that it's been since then. But at some point, my sister-in-law came over as well, and so yeah, we were all in the bedroom, and I remember I was on the birthing ball, and I was, just starting to bear down more, and the sounds got longer and groaning, and oh, the sounds of labor. Boy, that is another thing anyway. Also, my clothes started coming off more and more progressively as the night went on, and I actually think at this point it was probably around like 6 to 9 p.m. And so I just spent those few hours just like going into transition. And then I think it was a little bit later on that night that I felt like I just needed to push, and I was scared to push. And so my friend who was there to help me with the emotional and spiritual stuff, she just really was praying and speaking life and helping me to just go down deep. And I just had to let go of all of my fear and just push as hard as I could and just really go there. And if any of you have ever been in labor, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Just going into that very deep place. And yeah, I remember that at one point I was laying on my back, I think, on the bed, and I was really pushing, and they were all like, oh, I can see the top of his head. And they were sure that I was like at least very close to being fully dilated. And then his head literally went back in, and things literally stopped. And oh man, some of the details are a bit fuzzy, but I think I just kept laboring, and I kept laboring, but things just stopped progressing. Like, I think looking back now, that was the point that I should have pushed him out but due to not having a midwife, or even somebody who was professionally trained, like the lady who was there to be my doula was not fully even a doula yet. She was more just there to practice, I think. And so she wasn't trained fully in all of the moves that she could have done if she had been a midwife. So just the lack of having anybody there, we didn't know what to do. And so we just kept going all night, just me laboring, and then finally late, probably actually early morning, I don't know exactly what time it was, but the doula came to me and she was like, okay, you really should have pushed this baby out by now. Something seems to be wrong, but you are very tired and you need to rest. And so she gave me several options. She said, one, you can take Benadryl, and the other option was that somebody could go to her house and get her birth tub. And then the other option was for me to go to the hospital. I think that was the three options. And so somebody went out and got Benadryl and I took it. But I remember I just could not relax. Like, I remember that was probably one of the worst points for me, because even though it was my first time, I could feel too that something was wrong, that I should have pushed him out already, and I was in agony. I still get chills thinking about that like stretch of time. I had pushed for several hours that evening and I was exhausted. And so obviously there wasn't really a way to relax. Even though I had taken the Benadryl, I remember leaning over the edge of the bed and just feeling so tired and wishing I could escape. But there was no escape. There was no way for me to get out of it unless I would go to the hospital and get a C-section or something. I was dying. I just was so tired and I just wanted to escape. And the Benadryl did not really help. So finally they were like, okay, we'll go get the birth tub. And at that point it was Monday morning. So somebody went to the lady's house and got her birth tub and they brought it back and filled it up with water. And then when I got into the water, I didn't like it. Like, I think it was just so late in the labor and I was so tired that it didn't really help. I stayed in there for a little while, but I didn't love it. So then at that point, the lady who was there to help me emotionally and spiritually, her sister came over before she went to work, and she was all bright and fresh. All of us were exhausted, and she was like, okay, we are gonna get this baby out. And she, like, at that point I was completely naked, and she was like, okay, we're just gonna get this done. And so we tried pushing for a little while longer. I remember giving it all of my energy that I had left, like, oh, we're gonna do this. Nothing happened. Nothing would budge. And so they were like, okay, well, our final option is that you have to go to the hospital. And so I remember that at that point they put my clothes back on me and grabbed our bags, which I guess we had already. I don't remember if we had things packed or if they just threw stuff into a bag for me. I can't remember, but we grabbed some stuff and they helped me down the stairs and into the car. And I remember, having to pause every so often for a contraction and just feeling like I was dying. But we made it to the car, we got in, and thankfully my friend drove carefully, but I was dying that whole drive. It was horrible. And so we finally got there to the hospital, and she dropped us off outside. And then I remember, I wish that Mike was there, because I wish that Mike was here to record this with me, because I think he would remember details that I don't remember. I just remember that we got there and I literally could not walk by myself. And so Mike needed help because he couldn't help me walk and carry everything. So some nurses were outside and they saw us and they were like, "Oh, do you guys need a wheelchair?" So they went and grabbed one for me and put me in the wheelchair. And I remember that we went inside and they took me up to the registration desk or sign-in desk or whatever you call it. And we got signed in and I was in such a state that I wasn't able to really help Mike. He had to get all the information and get everything. So finally they got me into the system and then they took me in and put me in a room and I told them that I had been in labor for, okay, let's see here. I had already been in labor for over 24 hours. I had gotten my doula to come over to the apartment on Sunday morning, and this was now Monday, sometime on Monday. I don't remember when, but it was definitely more than 24 hours at this point. And so I told them that, and they didn't even believe me because they said I wasn't fully dilated yet. And so I still don't know what went on with that because I should have been, like, my doula said that I was pretty much fully dilated. But according to the nurses, I was not. And so they decided to put me in a room that apparently only people go into that room who are like imminently about to give birth. So they put me in there and I got a partial epidural. And at that point, I remember that was the first tiny bit of relief that I had gotten since I had started laboring. I was finally able to take a breath and somewhat relax. And so, yeah, I remember feeling like, finally, I can take a little breather. So I just kind of spent the next few hours resting and I slept a little bit. And the other detail I forgot to mention is that my water actually never broke. So, at midnight on Monday, the doctor came in and broke my water for me, and they said that they would wait until I had fully dilated before they would let me push. And then they would let me push. And so on Tuesday morning, which was a total of 2 days after I had started laboring, they said I was fully dilated and I was able to start pushing. And so, they let me push for 4 hours and they said that the 4-hour limit was the cutoff point, and then after that, they would figure out something else. So I remember that during that labor, that was another stretch of time that was absolutely excruciating. And even though I was somewhat dulled, like in my feeling because of the epidural, it still was so exhausting. And I pushed for 4 hours. And I remember that I pooped a little bit. And I remember, it just was such a long time. And at the end of it, I was exhausted and I had nothing in me left to give. And so finally, they were like, okay, you've pushed enough. Nothing's happening. You need to have something else. And they said that one of the other options besides a C-section was to use a suction cup, a vacuum suction. And please hear me when I say never do this, okay? So this doctor came in and he was a strong man. He was not weak. He came in, used this vacuum suction, and I did not see anything because, for one thing, I was so tired, and for another thing, I was laying on my back, so I couldn't see anything. So he came in there with this vacuum suction, and he used all of his weight to try to pull my son out. It felt like he was doing an abortion, and if I had had any strength or willpower left, I think I would have kicked him in the face, but I didn't, and thank God my son is safe and that his neck didn't snap or that he doesn't have brain damage. For a while after he was born, he had a circle on the top of his head. I literally feel like crying about it. But thank God nothing bad happened, and the baby still did not come out. And then the doctor, after that, looked at me and said, okay, we have used up all of our options. The only option left is an emergency C-section. And I remember that we were like, okay, well then that's what we gotta do. So after that, since I was like, okay, the inevitable is happening, this is what I've been avoiding, but we have no other choice, I just kind of sank back into the bed, let go, and just let everything happen. And everything happened so fast. It felt like a whirlwind, and everything was just kind of blurry to me. I had not eaten or slept in 2 to 3 days, besides, little dozing off here and there, perhaps, or little bites of food here and there. And while I had been laboring in the hospital, the nurse would not let me eat. She would not. And while she would be like going out of the room or something, Mike would sneak me bites of crackers because we had nothing else, and I was starving. But anyway, I remember being wheeled into the emergency C-section room, and they did the surgery super fast. And I remember during that time that I started shaking, and I couldn't feel, by that time obviously they had given me the full epidural, and I could not feel anything from my waist down. But from my waist up, I started just shaking, and my jaw just would not stop rattling. And after he was put into my arms was when that shaking stopped. And so, yeah, they did the surgery, and I remember that they held him up really fast so that I could see him, and then they whisked him away to weigh him and clean him up and stuff. And he was perfectly fine. Like, I remember that during this whole process, even at the apartment, they would be taking his heartbeat and stuff. Nothing was wrong with him. And it's kind of funny because now knowing him, he's such a strong, healthy fighter. It just totally makes sense. It lines up totally with who he is now, which is so adorable. But anyway, at that point, I was laying in that bed while they were doing the surgery, shaking, and I felt nauseous, and I had to wear a mask. It was 2021, so it was slightly after the COVID thing, but I still had to wear a mask. And I remember I was so scared of puking into my mask because I started to feel really sick. And then after they took the baby away, well, yes, I did take off the mask. I think they gave me permission to take it off because I said I was feeling really sick, and then I did end up throwing up. I remember that after that, I remember hearing the doctor say that I had such nice skin and that it sewed up so beautifully. And in that moment, he was the same doctor who had done the vacuum suction, and I was still feeling so mad that I wished I could have yelled at him for that, which was totally unreasonable in the moment that I was so mad because he was delivering my baby and he was helping me. So I shouldn't have felt that way, but I was still kind of feeling it at that moment. But anyway, they took me into a side room just off of that for a little while. And again, the timing of all of this was really not apparent to me. I was kind of unaware of the time. But I believe that it was Tuesday afternoon around 2 p.m. So total, I had started going into labor. Sunday morning was when the doula came over. So from Sunday morning till Tuesday afternoon was how long it was. And so, yeah, after that, they took me into that side room and I was able to hold him. And I remember that was where I first started to try breastfeeding. And he seemed to be very natural at nursing, and it felt really good. And I remember that was the first time feeling those like hormones rushing through my body. And so after a little while, they took me up to my hospital room and we were able to stay there for the duration of the stay. And I just remember feeling basically just so much euphoria after that long labor, being finally free, finally with my baby who was totally healthy, and with my husband there. I was so thankful that we were all safe, and it was just a surreal experience, and I was so happy. And he did so well with breastfeeding, and in fact, he did so well, and I did apparently so well that the nurses were shocked that he was my first baby. They thought that I had had to have multiple babies because I apparently was such a natural. And he did very well with breastfeeding, and I loved it so much. And I still miss it, but that was the story of the labor, and I still remember eating that first meal. They had good food there. I know that a lot of hospitals don't really have good food, but apparently there they did, and God knows I needed it because I was ravenous and I ate all the food that they would give me, and I felt so much better. And I still remember standing up for the first time after that surgery, and just the blood falling on the floor was unexpected, but they were like, oh, that's okay, they just cleaned it up. And I remember taking a shower and being clean, and learning how to walk again was quite interesting. I remember the first time I tried walking, I could barely make it a few steps, and then the second day, I think I was able to walk a little bit further. And then I think we were in the hospital 2 to 3 days, and then they wanted me to stay until the end of the week, but I was fine. My son was fine. And we were like, we wanted to go home. And so we basically made, I mean, I don't want to, we tried to be nice about it, but we were like, we need to just go home. Like, we're fine. And so the nurse really didn't want to let us go, but we did. And so, oh, you know what? Another thing is that I forgot is that they tried to make us take a vitamin K shot, and we did not want to do that because we don't think that's necessary. And so we didn't. And the guy literally tried to intimidate us and bully us into doing it, but we stood firm and we did not give in, which I'm thankful we didn't. So anyway, our experience in the hospital was good and bad. Some of the negative was people trying to push us to do things like the vitamin K shot, but other things it was totally fine. So yeah, that was a lot to process, and it took me probably about a year to even think about having another baby. And it's interesting because the last couple of years I've thought a lot about that labor story, and I have even spent time praying and asking God, like, what was that? Like, why did I have to go through that? And why was it so hard and so disappointing and so frustrating? And I still don't have all the answers, but one thing that is encouraging is that not too long ago, I was talking to a friend of mine. She had been in Haiti as a missionary for a while and working at a clinic, and she had delivered quite a few babies there, and she knows some things about birth. And so we were talking about it, and I was describing how when we were at the apartment and I was literally like trying to push him out, and they were like, "Oh, we can see the top of his head." And then his head went back in. And so we were talking about it, and she said, "Well, when you're about to push him out, and you see his head, like birth is imminent, like something stopped him from coming out." And so as we were talking about it, she had the idea that I had shoulder dystocia, which is when the baby is slightly off, and the shoulder gets stuck. And it is possible to do a maneuver of some kind. You can move the baby's position, and I think that if I'd had a midwife or somebody who was professionally trained, they could have done that maneuver, but we didn't, so we didn't know what to do. And another thing is that when I went to the hospital, they did not catch that. And it is possible that it wasn't shoulder dystocia. We have no way of knowing for sure. But I looked up like the symptoms of shoulder dystocia, and one is that it's common in babies more than 8 pounds and 13 ounces. And my son was 9 pounds and maybe 2 ounces. I can't remember the exact amount, but he was over 9 pounds. So he would be in that category. And the other symptom, one of the other symptoms was when you see the top of the baby's head and then it goes back in, which is exactly what happened. So I think there's a pretty high chance that it was shoulder dystocia, and that just was so encouraging to me that it wasn't that my body is incapable of pushing a baby out. It's not that it was my fault. It was just what happened, and next time we will know better to not just keep trying, that we would go into the hospital sooner if something like that happened. Or, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to figure it out next time. But it was just encouraging to have finally, like, I felt like I could finally put that fear to rest in my heart. And so that was just really encouraging, and I was so thankful. It felt like almost like a kiss from God, just like, now you can let that go, and it wasn't my fault. Because I think I kind of carried that blame for all these months and years of just feeling like I failed, and I wasn't a failure. And so that was just kind of cool. But yeah, that's the story. Those are all the details that I can remember, and I'm so thankful for my son, and I love him to death, and I'm so glad that I have him, and I pray all the time that I can have another baby sometime. I hope this was encouraging to any other moms out there, and just let me know what your experiences were. Be encouraged that no birth is a failure, that you have an amazing ability to give birth, and however it happens, whether it's through a C-section or whether it's through a natural birth, you did an amazing job. And our bodies are so amazing, and God is an amazing God for how He has created our bodies to literally birth humans. So yeah, I hope this was an encouragement, and have an amazing week, and I will see you guys in another episode. Bye.